Now, Reverend Jackson, thank you so much. You'll be leading a prayer vigil tonight in Chicago for Mandela. But before you tell me about that, tell me what it was like to look into Mandela's face the day he got out.
It was so overwhelming, Jake. There had been such a great build-up, such anticipation. You know, we were very akin to the South African apartheid struggle because of apartheid in the south of our own country. And we kind of, in many ways, coordinated our activities. And we knew that his persecution was redemptive because he was only guilty of trying to end a system that had no more honor in the world. And he walked in that room, and Jake, he recognized me, which really threw me off because he had seen the 84 and 88 campaigns, very much aware of what we were doing here in the country, and you could feel his presence and his being so present. You know, one would have thought, having been out of the mix for 27 years, he would be somewhat detached. He hit the ground running, Jake.
In the 1980s, as I don't need to remind you, but many of our viewers might not be old enough to remember, President Reagan designated the African National Congress a terrorist group. He also vetoed a bill by Congress to push for Mandela's release. Congress later overrid President Reagan's veto. What do you remember about that very divisive time, the 80s, when apartheid was such a heated debate all over the country, but especially on college campuses?
Well, the U.S. chose the clerk and picked Botha, and the apartheid regime as our ally. I mean, I can hear Kissinger saying now that Iran and the Shah and Botha and the clerk, they're in our national interests. After all, it's where the Atlantic and where the Pacific and the Indian Oceans come together, one of the great trade routes of the world, and therefore the apartheid is an internal problem. It had no moral standing in the world, and so the people began to rebel against it. But clearly, President Reagan and the U.S. policy was pro-white South Africa. And really, Mr. Mandela was on the terrorist list until July 1st, 2008, taken off by President George Bush. Until 2008, he was still on the terrorist list.
He said some things that were very controversial. In 2002, Mandela said, as the debate about the war in Iraq was beginning, but before the war had launched, Mandela said, quote, "If there's a country that has committed unspeakable atrocities in the world, it is the United States of America. They don't care for human beings." Now, obviously, there are lots of areas of American foreign policy that are ripe for criticism, but to say the United States does not care about human beings does not seem to be a fair statement. How do you reconcile things like that he said with the magnificence of his accomplishments and his forgiveness and everything great that he did?
You know, we should be very humble in our approach about this, Jake. You know, 246 years legal slavery, 100 years of legal Jim Crow in our own country, the apartheid laws in this country. In 1896 gave rise to apartheid laws in South Africa in 1948. Even to now, the apartheid is no longer a racial matter and social issues, but economic, healthcare, and educational and job apartheid is present even today. And he was simply saying that going into Iraq was a preemptive strike, broke international law. And matter of fact, Jake, the biggest demonstration in the history of the world took place that day, people saying, do not invade Iraq. Now we admit that 100,000 plus Iraqis have been killed, 6,000 plus Americans have been killed, 50,000 plus are injured, and we were wrong, had the wrong target. He was saying that we were wrong. President Barack Obama said we were wrong, and the fact is we were wrong.
What did Mandela think about the United States?
Had high hopes for America and had high regard for America. I mean, one of the first places he came when he was freed was America, because the fact is the demonstrations here, in a sense led by Attorney Randall Robinson and Dr. Mary Berry and Eleanor Holmes Norton and Reverend Fauntroy and Maxine Waters. For a year, we demonstrated every day, going to jail to protest. The U.S. Congress declared sanctions on South African apartheid. I met with Mrs. Thatcher. Britain would not go that far. So he knew that the big lever to change the course was America. He came and expressed an appreciation in tours over and over again. He had high regard and high hopes for America.